Hey everyone, welcome back. I am now in Copenhagen, currently soaked. It rains a lot here apparently, which I didn't realize, but it's a little cooler than Stockholm, which has also been nice. The plan is to talk about normal people today, which I finished a few days ago. It's a little bit harder to film videos often with a roommate, so I've got a little chunk of time right now and see if I can get everything out. I'm currently taking a course on the philosophy of happiness, which means a lot of reading. It kind of stinks because I have so many books that I want to read right now, so many that I bought, fiction and whatnot, and I enjoy fiction a lot more than, say, I don't know. I like essays, but some of them are very academic, it seems to me like intentionally confusing. But I'm enjoying the class, I enjoy the discussions, hearing people's opinions and whatnot. It's been interesting, definitely more difficult than my other courses so far. In terms of outside class, I've just been going around the city a little bit, the canals, the beaches, or harbor baths, I guess. I went to the Louisiana Museum, which was incredible. They actually have a literary festival there with Rachel Cusk, Lori Moore, some people that I'd love to see, and it kind of sucks because the timing just doesn't line up. But anyways, it's been an awesome experience. I am taking a lot of photos. I'm really glad I brought my camera with. I'm really glad I was required to bring my camera with to the photography class. And now I can take a lot of photos. Those will be up on Instagram soon, probably, if you want to see some of those. And today we went to a museum for class, which I've got to write about a little bit. There's a lot of writing, a lot of reading, so I'm busy, but I'm still going to try to get reading in. Right now I'm reading The Death of Ivan Ilyich, Leo Tolstoy. Next I will probably read either White Noise by Don DeLillo, which I'm super excited for. That's my dad's favorite book. That and Cloud Atlas, and so I'm really excited to read that one and talk about it when I'm able to see him at the end of the month. Or maybe This Other Eden by Paul Harding, which I'm also very excited for. And then I have a Turgenev book as well. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, I finished Normal People. Wanted to talk a little bit about that. I absolutely love the book. I have a lot to say about it. But I think maybe, I don't know, the general opinions I've gotten on this book, not necessarily from the media, but just people I know that have read it, I haven't exactly agreed with. So, I don't know, I kind of just want to give my opinion on the book, hear from you guys, see what you think. I'm really excited to talk about it and yeah, talk with some of you guys. So, also I really appreciate everybody that watched the last video. It meant the world. I was trying something a little different. I don't really know how well it went. I ended up leaving comments of stuff that I forgot to say. I was just very in my head for most of that video, but I do love to talk about songwriting as well as literature, and so that was a lot of fun for me. I hope you guys enjoyed that. But yeah, so Normal People. So for anybody that hasn't read it, Sally Rooney is, first of all, just an incredible writer. She has a simple style of prose, which when I say simple, I mean it's easy to read. You could sit down and read this forever. You just want to keep turning the pages. But there is actually a lot of detail and a lot of meaning behind the words. And so she just is kind of the perfect modern mix in terms of attracting new readers, becoming popular, but also just writing really great and meaningful literature, and has a really unique perspective that has taught me a lot, for sure. So the first thing I wanted to say is that a lot of the focus, it seems, and the reception of her book has been on the characters, and I didn't love the characters very much. To give a brief overview of the book, it's basically about a boy and a girl, Connell and Marianne. They start off in high school, they're in Ireland, and he ends up following her to college. And it all kind of tracks their relationship, good, bad, in-betweens. She's more wealthy, but with a worse family relationship. He has a single mom, less wealthy, but more friends. She's more awkward at school. Things kind of flip and flop. It really focuses on the relationship, and I think that's the key point. I honestly hope nobody really relates to Connell and Marianne, because they're not great people, if we're going to be honest here. And as much as we can love the literature and love the characters because they're in the book, I won't say that they're not good people, but I don't think that's even the point. Sally Rooney even said this in some of her interviews, but the focus is on the relationship. And I think she's using the relationship of the characters to highlight problems either that we have in communicating with each other, or problems with society in general that affects certain types of people, in certain situations, and she's using this relationship. She even said, which I thought was really interesting, that she conceives of characters as in relationships. There's no like self. There's no focus on the self. She doesn't make up characters individually. She creates them already like formed in a relationship and already knows kind of what's going on there. And something that she talked about that I thought was really interesting that I actually wasn't thinking about at all is kind of the idea that a conventional relationship, as in maybe like 20th century gender norms, or whatever the case may be, you know, we found out what necessarily doesn't work about that for a lot of people, but we haven't exactly found what does work. I'm not explaining that very well, but I think it's really interesting. She's trying to examine kind of more modern relationships and the kind of rules that we're trying to establish for them. What works for different kinds of people with different needs. It's quite interesting, I think. The goal of the book, in my mind, is to create two hyper realistic characters. They are so real, you feel like you know them. And to create these two very real characters and to have them relate to each other in a way that's just as real as the characters themselves. You don't have to like the characters, you can love the characters, but I think what we should be taking from the book is about the way that they interact with each other, the actual relationships themselves. And yeah, I'm just probably repeating myself, going off on tangents. But anyways, I just found that very fascinating. I think she also uses a lot of circumstances in the book to say something without saying something. One of the most interesting parts, I thought, was where they visited an abandoned an abandoned place, a really big like mansion, an abandoned mansion, something like that they called the ghost house. And they're kind of talking about, I learned this from the interview, she was talking about the Ireland housing crash, and how she was trying to make a statement with the building itself and putting these characters in the situations, but the characters don't actually understand it. So you're not really learning anything from the characters. I think Marianne at one point says, like, what's wrong here? Like, I don't know, something to do with capitalism. And that's all that she says. But I think the reader is meant to think about it. So you're seeing these circumstances, these characters in these settings who aren't always the most knowledgeable, aren't always the best people, but you're taking something away from that. And I really enjoy that. And the way that they converse, I watched a lecture on dialogue with Pam Houston, I believe it was, a while ago. My teacher recommended it to me. And the key thing I took away from that was characters have to have not opposing viewpoints, but they have to want something. They have to want something for themselves. You can't have characters who kind of want the exact same things going back and forth. What makes dialogue real is the undertone hidden beneath the words, where the reader can tell he wants this, he's not maybe necessarily saying it outright, she wants this, and there's a lot of that, which is part of what makes the characters so real in my mind. There are a few things I underlined. This kind of reminded me of Beautiful World, Where Are You?, where there's a lot more reflection on class, how people move in society. And Connell, who begins studying creative writing, like me, goes to this reading, and he observes or decides that, a lot of the literary people in college see books primarily as a way of appearing cultured. He says that culture as class performance, literature fetishized for its ability to take educated people on false emotional journeys so that they might afterwards feel superior to the uneducated people whose emotional journeys they like to read about. All books were ultimately marked as status symbols, and all writers participated to some degree in this marketing. I know Sally Rooney's talked about the struggle she feels with that, especially, I'm sure, having a best-selling book like this. And I think that that's definitely true in a lot of cases. And as someone who enjoys going to readings all the time, I can't say that that's why people go, right? I may not agree with that. I think in certain cases, everybody's different. But it's interesting to think about sort of buying a book as a commodity and sort of buying your way, therefore, into a social class, that class being people who read books. Something that I've talked about in other videos as well is, reading is not as important as, well, it's not as important to the world as it probably used to be when you talk about, the great time period for novels, which would be, I don't know, 20th century, 19th century, if we're talking a lot of literature, Tolstoy, like the great novel. It's not quite the same. Sally Rooney actually follows a very basic formula for a novel that, it's quite difficult to keep track of everything and to put a novel like this together, but it's not like a modern version. It is a modern version of a traditional novel. It's not necessarily innovating in a way that other writers might be. Anyways, I just think that's really interesting, the idea that, some people go to, let's say, museums or read books or whatever. The arts is more a way of belonging to a certain group of people, that people being ones who appreciate arts. And are you really taking something away from it? I don't know. I have no judgment. I'm not going to judge anyone in the way that, Connell might be. I don't go to a reading and be like, well, that person doesn't like books like I like books. But it is an interesting thing to think about, and I think that's what she does, is the characters might not go about doing it in the right way, but they do bring up really interesting points. Was there anything else I really enjoyed? Let's see. Well, this reminded me a bit of the Raymond Carver short stories I talked about, specifically the title one from the book, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love, and the idea that there's different kinds of love. I think at one point, Marianne questions, I forget the name of this guy, Lucas. She questions Lucas. She questions if she could have possibly hurt this boy Lucas's feelings when I'm not going to describe the scene, but it's not a great scene, and she eventually flees, and she kind of wonders if he loves her, and the sentence is, could he really do the gruesome things he does to her and believe at the same time that he's acting out of love? Is the world such an evil place that love should be indistinguishable from the basest and most abusive forms of violence? And then the last sentence after that too. Outside, her breath rises in a fine mist, and the snow keeps falling, like a ceaseless repetition of the same infinitesimally small mistake. That sentence at the very end is one of my absolute favorites. Wow. But the greater thing there, I just had that one underlined too, but the greater thing there, this is what I mean. Not only in Carver's story, for example, which I love his stories, but it's a happier couple talking about this idea. Here, she's creating this crazy dynamic, crazy relationship, and using it to she hints at it at the end what she's getting at, but really that's what the reader is likely thinking while these things are occurring, while they're witnessing this relationship. So she just does a great job of really looking not at the individual level, but she's not looking at a large group of people either. It's the relationship level. She's looking at relationships, how they change people, what they make people do, what constitutes a good relationship. I've really enjoyed this book a lot. I've also read Beautiful World, Where Are You? I've not read Conversations with Friends, although that is actually here in my little dorm here. So maybe I will, but I have so many other books I probably won't get around to it. I'm really excited for her next book, which is Intermezzo, I think is the name. And I think that's supposed to be a little different. There's a lot of talk about she always writes the same kind of thing, but really, I enjoy it, and I don't think I enjoy it for the same reasons maybe that a lot of people do, because it is just on the surface level a good book. But there's also so many ideas inside of this novel, and I think it's really worth reading, really worth talking about. I'd love to hear anyone's kind of thoughts on it. Let me know if I'm way off on what you took away from the novel. But I'm really excited to hear from you and talk about more books in the future. Like I said, I've got 3 weeks in Copenhagen, almost about 2 more now. I'll try to put out another video maybe at the end of those 2 weeks. And again, just really grateful, thankful to everybody who's been watching. It really does mean the world to me, and I hope you're having a wonderful day, that you've been enjoying whatever you're reading. And yeah, see you next time.